Still sorting through the initial reverberations of this remarkable day and a half in Russia. One of the few things most observers are latching onto is that we just don't quite know what the effect of this challenge to central authority in Moscow will be, even with the Wagner mercenary group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, calling off his march on Moscow and agreeing or being forced to leave Russia for Belarus. Let's get the view now from Ukraine. Yuriy Sak is an advisor to the Minister of Defence in Ukraine. Yuriy, very good to have you back on the BBC World Service on weekend. I guess this time yesterday, many people in Ukraine were doing a little bit of a victory dance over what they saw as the chaos inside Russia. It does look as if things have settled down a fair bit. Would you agree with that?
Good morning, Tim. Indeed, this time yesterday, we were joking between ourselves that we are running out of popcorn. And today in the morning, I already see people spreading images on social media, joking that I am prepared to sell 2 truckloads of popcorn because it's not going to be useful anymore. So on a serious note, what happened is very, very weird, to say the least. Because for almost 24 hours, there was a huge buildup. There was a capture of Russian cities. There was a defection of Russian army to the terrorist group Wagner. And then it looked like somebody went all in on poker, and then they just folded before turning their cards. Now, that is just so unusual and strange. But no matter what happened...
What do you think it means, Yuri, for the likely prosecution of the war inside your country?
Well, it doesn't mean much for our military plans and for our objectives. For us, every participant of yesterday's events is a war criminal responsible for committing atrocities on our land. This is why, regardless of the outcome of this, what seems to be at times an orchestrated charade, which was meant to send some strange message to the external audiences. Now, but for us, it means nothing because we will continue to liberate our land. These are all war criminals and terrorists for us. And we just want to understand once again that the only way to put an end to this war is not to hope for some sort of internal change in Russia. The only way to win this war is for Ukraine to defeat Russia on the battlefield. This means that the Western countries, our allies, have to continue to support us militarily, and that's the only path forward.
And I can understand that, you might well say that your military plans won't change on the basis of the instability inside Russia, and that your moral case to expel the Russians remains the same. However, I wonder if there is some concern that just instability among the enemy could mean potentially that things are more difficult to plan for.
Absolutely, but with one reservation. Now, everything that makes our enemy weaker, and what happened yesterday by all accounts means that Russia is weak. Russia is in a state of panic. They are resorting to different strange tactics just in order to secure some kind of survival or some kind of future or avoid prosecution. But we've always been very careful about what Russia does, because Russia is always lying. Russia cannot be trusted, and we can only trust the Ukrainian army. So the planning is always careful. We are fighting a smart war, and that's what will happen in the future.
I mean, yes, I guess the sort of conventional reading is that this has been a challenge to Vladimir Putin, and that it does suggest that perhaps he hasn't been quite in control of the competing factions at the top table inside Moscow. However, with Prigozhin now either gone or on the way out, perhaps with his private military group absorbed within the rest of the Russian army, if that happens, you could argue potentially that in the medium term it will mean that the Russian military is more unified, more streamlined, and therefore maybe more dangerous to you.
We'll see, what this will mean on the battlefield. But in the past, we have already seen that, even in those parts of the front line where Wagner Group was involved, heavily involved, like, for example, in and around the city of Bakhmut, they've been trying to gain control of Bakhmut for 10 months. They have lost tens of thousands of their soldiers, including Wagner soldiers, and they have achieved no result. At the same time, Ukrainian army, we are gradually moving forward in different parts of the front line, in the east, in the south. And we will continue to do that.
Yuriy, stay with us if you will, because it's a feature of Weekend that it's not just Audrey and me presenting, but we also have an expert panel, in this case John Nielsen Wright, Senior Lecturer in Modern Japanese Politics and International Relations at Cambridge University, and Olga Oliker, Programme Director for Europe and Central Asia at the Crisis Group. And Olga, I know that you have a question that you'd like to put to Yuriy.
Yes, thank you. Yuriy, thank you very much. And I thought your description of yesterday was spot on. I was talking to friends in Ukraine, and very, very bizarre watching everything unfold. One thing that struck me both yesterday and continues to strike me is that it was this weird refocusing of attention, right? We've been looking at Ukraine, the situation in Ukraine, Ukraine's resistance for a year and 4 months. And then here we go, a year and 4 months to the day after Russia launches the full-scale invasion, transforming the war. All the attention is on Russia. And that's what everybody's talking about. That's what everybody's thinking about. And one of the thoughts I had is this a distraction? Does it kind of pull attention away from Ukraine, Ukrainians, the counteroffensive, attacks on Ukraine, which, there was still bombing. Even as Wagner troops were taking control in Rostov, Russian forces were bombing Ukraine. But, this kind of was wiped off the news. Do you think of it this way, that this is perhaps dangerous because it does take attention away from what's going on in Ukraine?
Olga, thank you very much for the question. But I think if this was an attempt to distract the attention of the world from the continued missile terror on Ukrainian cities, this was, again, a very bizarre attempt and a very short-lived attempt, because it's over by now. Yesterday when I was speaking to different global media, I still got the question about the results of the missile attack on Kyiv that night. And it was more than 50 missiles. There were missiles that hit Kyiv. 3 civilians were killed in Kyiv. So unfortunately, Putin's terrorist regime is giving grounds for news coverage on a daily basis, and this will continue until we stop them. And until we defeat them on the battlefield. Our allies have expressed so many times unwavering commitment to supporting us. I don't think this will waver because everybody understands that the threat that Putin's regime is posing is not just to Ukraine, it's to the international community, to the rules-based international order. So if this was an attempt to distract, it failed. I think we as a coalition of free nations are back on track, and we will just continue.
Yuriy, can I just ask quickly, what do you think this episode means for the position of Lukashenko, the Belarus leader? He's not somebody that we talk about a huge amount in regards to the war between Ukraine and Russia, but in the years leading up to the invasion, he did act as something of an interlocutor between Kyiv and Moscow. He clearly brokered or was involved in this deal between Prigozhyn and Putin. Do you think his position has been bolstered by this? And do you think that makes him potentially a player when it comes to the way in which this war ends?
Lukashenko is not and has never been an independent figure. Lukashenko is the Kremlin's puppet who is doing what he's told to do. So his participation in the events of yesterday were just part of the plan. And, he was used as he always is used, whether it is for the positioning of the tactical nuclear weapons, and whether it's the use of the Belarusian airspace for attacking Ukraine, whether it's use of their land for land invasion. So, he's not a figure, so he's irrelevant.
John, I know that you've got something that you want to put to Yuriy.
Yes, I mean, in this bizarre story and the apparent solution that Prigozhin will be in Belarus, do you think he's going to just sit quietly on the sidelines, or will he be continuing his sort of critical observations? And what will that mean in terms of Russian nationalist bloggers who've been very critical of the incompetence of Russian generals?
In a way, it almost seems like Prigozhin, who is first and foremost a terrorist driven by financial profit. So he's probably just had enough of his Ukraine adventure, and he wants now to move on to some other parts where he can probably make more profit. So for him, it's a very convenient way out. He no longer has to commit himself to Ukraine, risk his life, and probably be somewhere in a safer place. I don't know, in sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere else. I think one of the scenarios is that he will absolutely disappear from the landscape of the Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and he will just start doing some other things. But one thing that they all have to understand, that Prigozhin, Lukashenko, the leader of Kremlin, they're all for us. They're all in the same boat, and this boat is headed towards Hague, towards the International Criminal Tribunal.
Yuriy, this is Audrey. I'm co-presenting with Tim, and we've spoken before, especially at the beginning of the war, when I was presenting NewsHour. Funny you should mention just at the what you said there about Prigozhin being, on sale basically to the highest bidder. I heard in the commentary yesterday somebody said that one of the possibilities could be, and I know that it sounds quite distasteful, but in war so many distasteful things happen, that perhaps Prigozhin, because he's on sale, was willing to be bought by Ukraine as a way of undermining Russia. I mean, I know that it sounds crazy, but talk to me about that. Do you think that it's a really, really crazy idea?
Well, I think that Russia is a country of cowardly terrorists and backstabbing traitors. And I'm confident that, regardless of the outcome of the yesterday's charade, and regardless of what will happen next to each one of its participants, a lot of people in Russia got that message very clear. They can be used again. They can be betrayed anytime. Look, they have killed 12 Russian pilots for nothing. They have destroyed Russian helicopters. We had memes spread on social media that the Russian army inflicted more losses on Russian army during one day that on some weeks the Ukrainian army would do. So it's terrorists and traitors, and they're doomed.
Yuriy Sak, very good to have you here on Weekend. Thank you very much for joining us. Yuriy Sak, advisor to the Minister of Defence in Ukraine.